Are you looking for a killer opening line for your novel? Well, in this video, I'm going to give you a simple to follow strategy for coming up with one. What's up, guys? Dave Jacobson here, best-selling author and book publisher. And in today's video, I'm going to share with you my 7-step simple to follow roadmap and formula for coming up with a killer opening line for your novel every time. So if that sounds good, pull up some popcorn and let's dive into the video. I'm going to shrink my melon-sized head here, and you can see here that I created a simple template in Word that we're going to go through together that's going to show you exactly how to come up with an amazing opening line for your novel. But before I reveal to you my 7-step strategy for exactly how to do that, and it's super simple to follow and easy to understand, we're just going to talk about quickly about what an opening line that is really good or amazing has about it that makes it amazing, right? We're going to talk about the criteria, if you will, for a killer opening line. So this is kind of based off of many years of experience of writing and editing. And I've watched all the YouTube videos. I've read many books. And so I've kind of tried to distill what are some of the top qualities that people agree about that an opening line that is great or amazing should have. And so now I'm going to reveal to you that list with an example for each quality, right? So the first quality that an amazing opening line should have is that it should hook the reader into wanting to read more, right? So the whole purpose of an opening line, besides just introducing the first paragraph, is to hook your reader. It's to get them to want to read the first paragraph and eventually read the first chapter and eventually read the whole book, right? So this is mission critical. This is not, one of many things that you may or may not want to include as important criteria for your opening line. This is something that every opening line needs to do. You need to hook the reader into wanting to read more, right? So an example of this is this opening line. The man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. This is, of course, is from The Gunslinger, Stephen King. And the reason this is a great opening line, one reason, is that it hooks you into wanting to know more, right? So who is this gunslinger? Who's the man? And who's the gunslinger? And why is he following him? These are all questions that the sentence kind of makes us want to think about. It draws us into the text, and it hooks us into wanting to find out more. Right? Now, there are other, obviously, examples that are probably better than this. It's just one possible example for this particular criteria. The next criteria is that a first sentence should introduce at least one main character, or in some cases, the setting of the book or novel, right? So an example of this is from The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, one of my favorite books of all time. I actually have a copy of it right here. And the opening line is, "In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit." So this actually does both, right? It introduces a main character as well as the setting, all in one, very concise sentence. So it provides a great example of this particular criteria. The next criteria for what I think constitutes a great opening line is that a great first sentence captures a reader's attention. So this is related to hooking the reader, but they're not exactly the same, right? You can have a hook for your book that doesn't necessarily capture a reader's attention and vice versa. But this one is also mission critical, right? This is probably the most important thing. You need to capture a reader's attention, which is related to the fact that if you do it well, then the reader will want to read more, right? So an example of this is, "It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. That, of course, is from George Orwell's 1984, in case you've never read it. And what I love about this opening line is it just captures your attention, right? Because the clocks are striking 13. That's not a normal thing for clocks to do. So You start out with just a pure, bright, cold day in April, which helps kind of set the atmosphere and setting. But then you have this just attention-grabbing next clause, which is, and the clocks were striking 13. So great example of that. Let's move on to the next criteria. So a great first sentence gives the reader a sense of tone, right? So every book, ideally, a well-written book should have some sort of tone associated with it. And one of the things you want to do is you want to clearly communicate that tone right out of the gate, ideally in your first paragraph, in best case scenario, in the first opening sentence. So an example that I think does this well is from Middlemarch, and the sentence is, Miss Brooke had that kind of beauty which seems to be thrown into relief by poor dress, right? It really just kind of sets the tone as well as introducing one of the characters, and it does a lot of other nice things as well. So getting into the next opening sentence criteria, a great first sentence gives the reader a sense of character voice, right? So an example of this is, if you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born and what my lousy childhood was like and how my parents were occupied and all before they had me. And all that David Copperfield kind of crap. But I don't feel like going into it if you want to know the truth. This is one of my favorite opening lines of all time, and it clearly illustrates character voice, right? So this is, of course, from The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Now, pretty soon I'm going to get into giving you my 7-step formula for how you can easily come up with amazing killer opening lines yourself at home. But before we do that, I've got 2 more criteria we need to get through here. So the next one is a great first sentence introduces a main theme of the book. And here, as an example, I provided from Anna Karenina, happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. This, of course, is from Tolstoy, and it definitely introduces clearly a theme of the book, right? So let's go on to the final criteria here. A great first sentence hints at the main conflict. So an example of this is, all this happened, more or less. This is from Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. So, try to provide an example for all of these, but these are the criteria, right? Some of these are essential, some of them are not. I've tried to indicate which ones are essential here by saying this is mission critical. The others are, if you can do it, it's great, right? It's just going to make your opening sentence even more powerful and effective. Okay, so that leads us to the next part of this video, and the part that I know you're all excited for, and that part is this. We're going to talk about now, based on that criteria that we just went over, what is a simple process that you can follow for your next novel to help you write an opening sentence that seeks to accomplish most, if not all, of the qualities we just talked about, right? Now, I've already said that some of these qualities are not essential. They're just nice to haves, not need to haves. Some of them are mission critical, but not all of them are. But that said, what if you could write an opening line that does all of these things at once? Well, that's going to be a home run, right? That's really going to draw the reader in. It's really going to establish either the main character or the setting or both. It's going to hint at the main conflict. It's going to introduce theme and tone and character voice. And if you can do all of those things while also capturing a reader's attention, then you're going to have a slam dunk home run opening line. And so what I've sought to do here is create a simple to follow step-by-step formula that will allow you to do that every time with your novel. So let's get into it. What is the first step? So step 1 is to articulate the premise concept of your book in a paragraph or 2. and then write down possible themes for your book and some of the main characters. And I'm going to do this for you, and I'm going to provide an example of doing exactly this in just a moment. All right. Now, if you don't have at least an idea of your premise or concept, and if you don't at least have like a vague idea of your theme and your main characters or your main characters, then clearly you're not ready for this step, right? You're not ready to write your first sentence, because in order to establish theme, you need to know what your theme is, right? In order to introduce a main character, you need to have thought through who your main characters are. So first you have to do that. And then once you've done that, you're ready to take this step, right? So I'm not going to go into detail about how to come up with those other pieces in this video, but assuming you have that locked down, then you're ready to take step one. And step one is make a list of 3 to 5 things that are very intriguing about your character or your concept, right? Or your premise. And then choose the best 1 or 2 of those things that are very intriguing, ideally choosing one that relates to your theme. Okay? So, in order to make this more clear, I decided to come up with an example, right, that I'm going to walk you through. And in order to do that, the first thing I did is I went over to ChatGPT, and I actually asked ChatGPT the following question. Please give me some ideas for a middle grade fantasy book, right? And it just spit out a bunch of ideas. I'm going to paste the first idea it came up with right here, so you can see it, right? So this is the premise that it's a random premise. It's not a book that I'm writing. It's just something that ChatGPT just generated for me. And the premise is this. The working title is The Clockmaker's Apprentice. And the premise is a 12-year-old orphan is taken in by a mysterious clockmaker who secretly repairs not just clocks, but the very fabric of time. When time begins to unravel, it's up to the apprentice to travel through broken hours and forgotten days to find the lost hour that will fix everything. Okay, so that's the premise. That's also the concept of this book. Again, ChatGPT came up with this, not me. I'm just using this as an example so I can walk you through step by step what this looks like, right? And so, as I mentioned up here, you need not only a premise, but you also need some ideas for your theme and some of the main characters. Well, we got 2 of the main characters already mentioned here in the premise, right? We've got a 12-year-old orphan. So let's just say that's the protagonist. And then we've got a mysterious clockmaker who's like an ally of the protagonist that helps him along, right? So there's our 2 main characters, right? So let's write those down just so we're absolutely critically, so we're being very clear about this process here and what you need to do. So characters, 12-year-old orphan. Let's call him Johnny Little. I just made that up off the top of my head a little prior to making this, right? So it doesn't really matter for the purposes of this video, but let's say Johnny Little and then Clockmaker. Right? So we've got our 2 characters. Now we've got everything we need to get started with drafting, coming up with our opening line. So step 1, again, is to make a list of 3 to 5 things that are intriguing about your character or concept, and then choose the best 1 or 2 of those, right? Ideally choosing one that relates to your theme. Okay. So let's come up with some intriguing things about our about this concept. So I find it intriguing that the idea of time travel, right? And so, for example, we're going to write down time travel. That's an intriguing thing, right? Time is unraveling. It's another intriguing idea associated with our concept or premise. Mysterious clockmaker maybe knows how to fix time, right? And so that's intriguing. That's interesting that some human or person could, fix time. And then, I also added one intriguing thing about the character. Well, the character's an orphan. That's kind of intriguing to me. So I wrote that down, right? So we have 3 to 5 things, right? We just made a list. That's all we did. We made a list of 3 to 5 things that are intriguing about the character or concept, right? So there's our list. That's your first step, okay? So once you have that list, you're ready to go on to the next step. And the next step is this, step 2. Now, use the best intriguing thing you selected and write a clever sentence that highlights the intriguing thing in a way that grabs the reader's attention. Okay? So this is step 2. You're just going to take one of these things that you just wrote down, intriguing things. I'm going to choose time is unraveling. Okay? I find that to be very intriguing in and of itself. And so for my example, I'm going to just create a simple, somewhat clever sentence. And it is this: yesterday, the future stopped. Right? So this is not like my be all end all killer opening line yet. We're only on step 2. But what I've done here is I've created just a somewhat clever sentence that highlights the intriguing thing, which was, again, time is unraveling, in a way that grabs the reader's attention, right? So if I read that, yesterday the future stopped, that is going to grab my attention, at least to some degree. Again, we're going to refine this. We've got 5 more steps to go before we have our finished product of an opening line. But right now, we've got our beginning here. So we've gone through step 1, which is just identifying intriguing things about our concept or character. And we've gone through step 2, which is to create a simple sentence about one of the things we found to be intriguing. Okay? So that's where we're at. Now we go on to step 3. Step 3 is now rewrite the clever sentence in a way that mentions one or more of your main characters and or the setting. Okay? So notice that these steps are really just like helping us refine things so that we're actually incorporating each of these criteria into what will eventually be our opening line, right? So what we're doing here is we're just mentioning. All you have to do is mention it. You don't have. There's not a lot of brain, work that needs to be involved in this. You just need to mention one or more of your characters. Okay. So our example is we're starting with this sentence. Yesterday, the future stopped, and we're rewriting it to include a main character or a setting. Okay. So now I turned it into this. Yesterday at exactly 1:17 p.m., the future stopped. But no one in Windermere noticed but me. Okay, so all I've done is sort of expanded the sentence a little bit in a way that included, in this case, both the setting and a main character, which is me, right? The way this is written now, this is going to be a first-person story. And so the narrator is talking about himself and says, yesterday at exactly 1:17, the future stopped, but no one in Windermere noticed but me. Now you can already see that this is turning into quite a good opening line candidate, right? It's not perfect yet, but because it includes the setting, one of the main characters, and an intriguing concept, well, guess what? Now it's ticking a lot of the boxes, right, that we talked about for the criteria. The intriguing concept is drawing our attention, is grabbing our attention. It's hooking us to want to read more. And the mention of the setting and the main character is grounding us in the story right out of the gate, right? So it's becoming a good opening line. So now let's go on to the next step, step 4. Well, step 4 is now consider point of view. What is your book's point of view? If it's third person, ensure the sentence is written in the third person. If the story is written in first person, ensure the sentence is written in first person. Okay, so I wrote it when I was just thinking about it. I wasn't thinking about POV, right? I was in the last step, I was just focused on mentioning the main character. But now I want to think about, okay, what's the point of view of my story? Well, if it's first person, then this works perfectly, right? We don't have to make any changes to it. But let's say we want to convert it to third person, right? Well, then in that case, we would simply rewrite the same sentence in third person. Something like this. Yesterday at exactly 1:17 p.m., the future stopped, yet no one in Windermere noticed but Johnny Little. Right? So now we have the third person version of that same opening line, and it still sounds great. It's an excellent opening line, right? But it's not perfected yet. We're gonna get there. So let's move on to step 5. But before I do, if you're getting value out of this, I would really appreciate it if you comment, like, and or subscribe to this channel, and consider sharing it. Like if you have other people, writers who are into this kind of thing, and you think it might be useful for them, consider sharing it as well. So let's move on to step 5. Step 5. Now ask yourself, does the sentence hook the reader into wanting to read more? Okay, well, let's ask ourselves that. Yesterday at exactly 1:17, the future stopped. I mean, that right there hooks me, right? Yet no one in Windermere noticed but Johnny Little. Okay, so now there's all these questions in my mind. Why didn't anyone notice but Johnny Little? Why did Johnny Little notice? Why did the future stop? How did it stop? So to me, these are all hooks that, and what is a hook, by the way? Let me pause for those who don't know. So when I think of the word hook in the context of writing, I imagine fishing. Okay, so in fishing, what do? You cast a line out, and the line's got a hook on the end of it, and you're trying to reel in a fish, right? Well, as writers, we're trying to reel in prospective readers for our work. So that's what a hook does. Just like a hook will capture the fish, a hook in writing will capture a reader, right? So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to capture the reader using these hooks, and these hooks are really like ideas or questions that are dangling out there that people, if they notice it, they're going to be intrigued, right? So that's what a hook is. So does this have hooks? Yes, it does have hooks. So the example here is it does already. We don't have to do anything else in step 5. But this is an opportunity if your particular sentence that you're working on doesn't have a hook, a strong hook. This is where you can improve it by adding something that, really draws the attention of the reader and makes them want to read more. So because we already have multiple hooks in this example, we're going to move on to step 6. And step 6 is this. Now consider your tone, okay? Write down 2 or 3 words that describe the tone you're aiming for with your particular book, okay? And then you're going to rewrite or tweak the sentence to ensure it matches and makes clear what your tone that you're going for is, okay? So there's a lot of different types of, tone that you might want your book to have. For example, you might want the story to be dark or grim, right? You might want it to be witty or satirical. You might want it to be melancholic or reflective or playful or whimsical, right? Middle grade fantasy is often whimsical, suspenseful or tense. Those are other sort of, one-word tones that you could be trying to achieve with your particular work. So the first thing you want to do is write down some of those things. Are you looking for humorous, whimsical, dark, grim? What are you trying to make the tone be with your particular story, right? So once you've written down a few things, let's say dark and grim, we're going to go for dark and grim, okay? So we need to take this sentence that we just wrote yesterday at exactly 1:17 p.m., the future stopped, yet no one in Windermere noticed but Johnny Little. And we're going to, the next step is just to tweak it just a little bit to make it a little dark, right? Make it a little grim. And so the example I'm providing here is, I changed it from 1:17 p.m. to midnight because that evokes in my mind something a little bit more dark, right? Yesterday when the clock struck midnight, the future stopped, yet no one in the gloomy town of Windermere noticed but Johnny Little. So all I did was added the word gloomy, town of, right? And changed the time to midnight. And now, just by making those small tweaks to our sentence, we've incorporated the tone of our novel into our first sentence, right? So yesterday, when the clock struck midnight, the future stopped, yet no one in the gloomy town of Windermere noticed but Johnny Little. So when I read it with those small touches, you can feel a little bit of a dark vibe going on, right? So we've successfully incorporated tone into our opening line. Now we move on to step 7. Now we want to consider voice, right? What is the voice you're aiming for? Formal, sarcastic, witty, humorous, creepy. This should be genre appropriate, of course, but rewrite the sentence to ensure the sentence matches the voice of your novel, right? So if it's written in first person, make sure it matches your character's voice, the narrator's voice. If it's not, then you can use your own voice, right, as a writer. And so as an example here, I tweaked, I started with this line, which I just read to you, this opening line, and I tweaked it to just kind of add a little voice. And the net result was this. Yesterday, when the clock struck midnight, the future stopped, in case anyone cares. Yet no one in the gloomy town of Windermere noticed but me. Okay? So the first thing I did is I turned it back to first person, because I decided I liked that better. So I said, but me instead of Johnny Little. And the second small change I did is I added this little tweak right here, in case anyone cares, right? Going for some sort of that kind of sardonic, self-deprecating Holden Caulfield kind of Catcher in the Rye voice style. I just added that little tiny touch, and just doing that, now we feel like we know something about the narrator, right? We've established a little bit of voice in this opening line. And just by tweaking it a little bit, now we've incorporated voice. So let's move on to this final bonus step. Now consider conflict. Can you draft a sentence in a way that hints at conflict? If so, you've got a stellar opening line, right? So for example, now I already think this has conflict, right? We have the idea of the future stopping. Well, what's more high stakes than the future stopping? So we have implied conflict already. But I believe I tweaked it a little bit. Yeah, I tweaked it a little bit to make it a little bit more impactful from a conflict perspective. And so what I did is I said, yesterday, when the clock struck midnight, my future officially ended. In case anyone cares. Yet no one in the gloomy town of Windermere noticed. Okay, so now, not only do I have the in case anyone cares voice and stylistic components of that plus the tone, but now, because it says my future officially ended, now we have conflict that specifically affects one of the main characters, right? Now, conflict drives action and decision-making in storytelling. So by having the conflict there, it's going to drive our story forward. It's going to make our hook even more impactful in grabbing the reader's attention, because now they identify with and care about this character. And now we have what is potentially a killer opening line for our novel, right? I'll read it one more time, and you tell me if you think it's good. Put it in the comments if you think this is a good opening line or if you think it's not very good. Yesterday, when the clock struck midnight, my future officially ended. In case anyone cares, yet no one in the gloomy town of Windermere noticed. Okay, so we've got tone, we've got the character introduced, we've got the setting introduced, we've got a hook, we've got grabbing the reader's attention, we've got voice. So we're doing all of these things in this opening line, which makes it very impactful. So then the final thing you need to do is evaluate. Okay, how many of the following criteria does your opening line satisfy? And then, of course, I just repeat the things that we talked about at the very beginning. Great first sentence hooks the reader, introduces at least one main character or setting, captures the reader's attention, gives the reader a sense of tone, gives the reader a sense of character voice, introduces a main theme of the book, and hints at the main conflict. Does my opening line do these things? Yes, 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 and yes. And for those reasons, folks, this is a killer opening line, and I've just given you my step-by-step process for coming up with it, which you can easily do at home. So if you got value out of this, please consider liking, subscribing, and yeah, sharing the video. And I'll see you next time.